Welcome to Navigating the Mess with me, your host, Leah Nistico. I'm here to inspire you to find greatness in your life amidst all the chaos. Join me while I talk about my real life stories and finding out who I truly am beneath all the challenges life can throw you. Let's find connection in our chaos. Hello, welcome back. So what I've been trying to do is go consecutively in order of my memories in my life of what I've learned throughout all these years. And so logically now we're at the point of why I was pregnant at my wedding. So I'm going to get into all those details and what we've learned along the way about being parents, what we would have done differently if we have had the chance to do it again. After we got engaged, we quickly had to just start the process of calling all like venues and getting all that stuff out of the way. When all that stuff was done and we were like, okay, so now it's a waiting game since I think we planned it like a year and a half away. We started talking about like the next steps after marriage, what we both planned to do, like what are our values, what are like our needs after getting married. We both said we wanted to start having a family. That was great. We were both on the same page with that. For me, I've always wanted to be a mom since I can remember. That was like number one priority for me. Well, I was told by the doctors that when I had an eating disorder that long, there was a chance that I probably couldn't conceive or have any babies. That was always in the back of my mind. So then after we got engaged and we talked about all that, I was really scared. I had a lot of anxiety about waiting another year and a half in order to start trying to have a baby because there was that possibility that I couldn't have a baby. Then we were talking about, well, what would it look like if I wasn't able to have kids? You know, like was that a deal breaker for him if I couldn't have kids? What would our relationship look like? We started talking about just having a bunch of dogs and kind of what our life would look like if that did happen. But then like the anxiety was really on me and I said, you know what, I can't wait a year and a half to basically, it was like my fate, you know. I was ready to start trying like right away because I did hear that some people, it takes years for them to conceive and have a baby naturally, even without having any issues. So I thought, well, let's just get ahead of the game. And I didn't really think that it would happen as fast as it did. It happened within 2 months and I was actually blown away. I was super excited, but being pregnant, it was a happy time, but it was also very scary because I didn't want to do anything to lose this baby, right? It finally happened for me and for us. Now I don't want to do anything that could jeopardize us having a family. We were so excited. I remember taking a picture of the pregnancy test and immediately sending it to my best friend because, yeah, I have to tell somebody. I cannot wait. I couldn't just hold on to that information for 12 weeks. I had to tell somebody. And then I think we only waited like a week or two before we started telling family members because we were so excited. I remember when we went over to tell my in-laws, Phil's parents, and everyone was there. Like his parents, I believe his brother was there, but his sister was out of town. We got everyone into the living room, and Phil has a sister who is in a wheelchair and she's nonverbal. She spells out what she wants to say. We thought that it would be cool to incorporate her into how we tell the family. We told her and she was spelling it out for everyone else. My mother-in-law, I feel like she's always wanted grandchildren. I knew that from right from meeting them the first time because that's basically she was talking a lot about, marriage and kids and all this stuff. She was the most excited. It was really nice to see that the excitement was on the same level as us. She immediately screamed and, oh my god, I'm so excited. And it was a very nice reaction. Then obviously I looked at my father-in-law and I noticed that he was whispering to my brother-in-law, and I did hear what he had to say. It was very disappointing, kind of put a damper on our excitement. He had said, do you think this was planned? Regardless, if it was planned or not. This is our life. I never had, front seat to my own life. It felt like when we got engaged, it felt like, yes, this is my time now. This is our time. We can, run our own life and be the main character of our life. And then that comment was said. It really brought the people pleaser out in me. I was thinking, well, I thought he was going to be happy and maybe it was too soon. It was just, we needed to focus on our excitement, but it did obviously put a damper on that night. After that, I think we just kind of pushed it aside. We didn't really, back then, Phil and I didn't communicate a lot about what was bothering us. We kind of just sideswiped it and let's keep going forward kind of thing. So I was nervous about telling my parents after that, but I thought of like a cute way to tell my mom and stepdad. I think it was like I put like coffee beans because it was the size of a coffee bean at that time. It brought over coffee beans and we were outside. It was the summertime and everyone was by the pool. I gave my mom like the coffee beans and obviously she's going to be like, what are you doing? I said, that is the size of your grandchild. And she was like, what? And she didn't understand it. So then I told her I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. Immediately she was, oh my God, you're reliving my life. And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know if it was a good thing. I didn't know if it was a bad thing. I'm here telling you something that's super exciting that's happening in my life and our life and everybody's life because there's going to be another grandchild in the family. Here you're sitting there and telling me that I am reliving your life. So I didn't know how to take that. But now I kind of understand why she said that. It wasn't maybe what I was hoping she was going to say in the moment because I wasn't sure if she was even excited about it. She kind of just had a straight face. I would have expected more like, oh my gosh, congratulations, this is so exciting. But anything that happens in my life that is good, the excitement isn't there. It's not matched. I've noticed this like throughout my entire life. So I don't know what I was expecting in that moment. But after living what I've lived, since that part, I know why she said it. It does make sense just based off of what we've lived from then. That's going to be a different episode. I'll dive into that deeper at a different time, but it's not exactly what we wanted to hear. And me having to ask like, but you're excited though, right? Like this is a good thing. This is a good thing. We're having a baby, I think that we were just the most excited and we had to focus on our excitement, kind of forget about everybody else's opinions. I really held everyone else's opinions above mine for such a long time. That's why I was just always looking for outside validation if I'm doing the right thing in life. If it's not pleasing them, then maybe I'm not doing the right thing. But really, if it's pleasing you, then you are doing the right thing. You're exactly where you're meant to be in life. You're on the right path for you. When we got married, I believe I was 4 months pregnant. So it was perfect to find out the gender of our baby at our wedding. We asked our wedding cake maker to see if she could put the gender color inside of our wedding cake. I got the sonogram taken. I think it was like a couple days before she needed to bake the cake or she needed to know what the sex of the baby was. Luckily, they got a perfect shot. They knew what the gender was going to be. Gave it to me in an envelope. I gave it to my best friend who was the maid of honor. She gave it to the cake maker. We got to make it happen. That was super exciting. Everyone at the wedding was so excited. They were looking at the cake, trying to see if they could see any type of icing that may have poked through. Throughout the night, we kept getting a lot of family members like, okay, when's cake cutting? We want to find out what the gender is. It was a very exciting time. Our MC at the wedding was one of his really good friends. and he is really good at that job. He was amazing throughout the entire evening. But when we were doing the cake cutting, he just like turned it up a lot, like, what do you think it's going to be, Leah? And what do you think it's going to be, Phil? And everyone had surrounded the table and just, you could feel the excitement. It was everything I could have asked for in a gender reveal. It was perfect. When we cut into the cake, I thought I was having a girl just based off of dreams I had before the cake cutting. And Phil was just adamant that it was going to be a boy. When we first cut into it, I thought I saw pink icing and I was like, oh my gosh. And then when we pulled out the cake, it was blue and everyone was cheering. I mean, it was a really good reaction, everything I would hope for. I do know that I never wanted to have a girl based off of just how I was brought up, and my relationship with my mother wasn't the greatest. So I just always said that I never wanted to have a daughter just in case. And I didn't want to hurt my daughter, and maybe things would have been different. I think things would have been different just based off of how I decide to show up in my children's life. But it was just something that I'd always said. I was relieved when it came back and it was blue and we were going to have a boy, and I was just very excited. Fast forward to the birth of Anthony. He was supposed to be born in March, and then he went into April. I remember that night very vividly. They were going to induce me, but instead they wanted to try this other method. So they did. I started getting contractions right away. So they wanted to see me back at the hospital later that night. When we went back and we were waiting for the doctor to come in, I had to go to the bathroom. So I stood up and my water broke. Everyone was really shocked that, because being your first baby, it usually takes a really long time for labor and contractions and everything else, like until the baby is born, like a really long time. The fact that my water broke really early and they didn't even have to induce me, she rushed there and basically said, okay, it's baby time. I was very scared. I had a plan in my head of what I wanted the whole labor to look like. It did not go to plan. I think you just have to have an open mind when it comes to that, because nothing is going to go exactly to your plan, and to just go with the flow, I guess, would be the best advice I could give. But yeah, it was exciting. Phil, being Phil, is very like technology based, and he was timing my contractions and he knew exactly when the next one was going to come. So he would like pre-warn me, which wasn't the greatest for me, I guess. So I was like loving life and not having any pain. And he's just like, oh, are you feeling good? I'm like, yeah, I am. And he's like, okay, in 2 minutes, you're not going to feel good anymore. It's like, okay, thank you for that. I was really nervous about the whole contractions. I had told the doctor that I wanted to have a epidural. I wasn't too thrilled about having a needle in the back, but I didn't want to feel any pain. I was really scared about that. The doctor went back home because she thought it was going to be the next day where I would be delivering. She had to come back at like 10 in the morning. She like ran in because I was already pushing when she was in, and she was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this went so fast. Like, I was only in labor for 6 hours with my first baby. So she was quite shocked about that. But the complication that I ran into was I was laboring so quickly that I couldn't have an epidural. I think it was at 11 p.m. I was in a lot of pain. And I called the nurse and I said, I'd like to have an epidural. And she's like, okay, I'll go and call the guy. She comes back. She's like, unfortunately, he went home for the night. I said, well, call him back because I'm in a lot of pain. Or is there somebody else that can do it? And she's like, I'll try and call him back. And she checked me and she's like, I can't call him back because you're too far along in the labor and it's not going to do anything anyways. You're laboring too quickly. I was really scared. I turned to Phil and I think I almost started crying and said, I can't do this. I don't think I can do this. He was such a trooper the whole way. You got this. I'm here the whole time. Exactly what you needed in like a husband and a coach in everything. You're just gonna be in the zone. We're all here. You're safe, and we're just going to push through it. When Anthony came out, I think it was him that had the cord wrapped around his arm. So she just quickly did it, and Phil I've never seen a baby right from the womb come out, and he was really worried. So that worried me because Anthony was purple, but that's normal. Anthony wasn't crying right away. I was really like, is he okay? What's going on? Just anxiety, right? It's okay. He'll cry. Then they put him under the warm light. He just pinked up right away. It was just the best. That was the best time of my life. You'll never forget that. This is going to be really graphic, but I needed to be stitched up a lot. I had a 3rd-degree tear, so it took longer for her to stitch me up than it was for me to actually push out a baby. Luckily, I didn't feel anything when she was doing that, but it was like a good hour for her to do that. My mom and my mother-in-law were waiting in the waiting room. They kept texting Phil like, hey, can we come in now? And kind of like pressuring like that. So I didn't know about that. He dealt with that. But I think what we would have done differently is the minute I started laboring, I think I texted everyone, to all my friends, and Phil texted all the family. And when I wasn't able to respond to texting anymore because I was really in labor, Phil had both phones and was just texting everybody all the updates. So what I would have done differently is not done any of that. Just been the two of us. I would have maybe told important people that I was in labor, but put in a boundary of, I will let you know when we are ready to have you come over, or I will let you know when I'm ready and settled in my room and I have more time to text you, and put in that boundary and not have the phones constantly going off by multiple different people. And maybe these people just didn't know how many people we told that they were all contacting us at the same time. So that was a bit stressful with the stress of labor. I had just been done getting stitched up, and my mom and my mother-in-law were coming in the room, and it was like, okay, and immediately they're going to the baby. I kind of felt like, obviously, yeah, that's what they're here for, is the baby. But I'm also here and delivered a baby and would have liked to be asked if I was okay, and made feel like I'm special too, or I'm important as well. I just did a huge, huge thing. What we would have done differently is not had people there that exact night. We were still in the labor and delivery room. We weren't even in our room yet. People were already coming in to see the baby. I think I only held Anthony on my chest one time, and then they had to take him away, and that was it. I didn't get to hold him until we were in our room because my mom was holding him and my mother-in-law was holding him, getting pictures. Phil was holding him. So I feel like I missed out on some bonding contact at that moment. I feel like in that moment, the first night your baby just came out should just be between you and the baby and the dad. Just my opinion and what we would have done differently. After your first baby, you spend a couple of nights in the hospital just so that they can monitor the baby and monitor you. It's your first baby, so they want to get you baby ready, right? And see if you're ready to take this baby home. And on a sheet, I had said that I wanted to mainly breastfeed. And that was my goal. I was really hoping for that. I tried to get him to latch. He didn't. And he was having a lot of trouble. I was stressing out a lot about breastfeeding and latching and trying all these different tricks, and nurses coming in and grabbing my boobs and grabbing Anthony and trying to position. It was just a lot of stress for me, and probably for Anthony, because he's trying to eat, he's starving, and he can't get anything. On top of that, we've had all extended family come in, and they're visiting for hours on end just wanting to hold him. But then now it's like, okay, it's feeding time, and now I'm having trouble with all this. There was a lot going on. I wish that it would have just been us and we could figure it out on our own. Like, we never had kids before. I've never tried breastfeeding before. It was It was a lot. Then we weren't sleeping, and Phil had to go out and get like all these different things that could help with breastfeeding. It just wasn't happening. The nurses at the time for me weren't, some of them were good and some of them were not so great. Some of the older nurses that I had made me feel like there was something wrong with me, why Anthony couldn't breastfeed. That wasn't needed because there was already a lot of stress and anxiety about breastfeeding and it wasn't happening for me. And so we ended up buying a pump and that's like super expensive. I was pumping and I was trying to bottle feed him, but then the nurses were saying he's going to be confused between the nipples. And there was a lot that I had no idea that was involved. On top of that, we were now day 2 and they wanted to discharge us, but one of the nurses came in and said, well, we need a plan B. I said, of course, yeah. I'll give you a plan B and plan C. I just felt like they were looking at me like I was a child, like I had no idea what I was going to do. I had this baby and I don't have any plans other than breastfeeding. Like, obviously, if it doesn't work, I'm going to pump and bottle feed. And if that doesn't work and I lose my milk, I'm going to do formula. Those are the next logical steps. But the way they kind of went around it was as if we had no idea what we were going to do. It just made us feel like children, or that we couldn't run our own life or do life at all, and this baby is not going to be in good hands is how it made us feel. When Anthony came out, it was like 2 a.m. when we were up for like days, I feel, trying to feed him and all these things. We were nocturnal by the time we went home. We were nocturnal. We were sleeping during the day and up at night, and we needed to get in a sleep schedule. There was so much that I had no idea about when a baby came into the world, right? Plus, like, hormones are all over the map because you just had a baby. And logically, there's going to be like the baby blues. You're a little down and you just want to be alone with your baby and your husband. That's totally normal. I remember being so exhausted. I think like just sleeping in the living room. I had the bassinet beside me. Anthony was sleeping in there. This was during the day. Blinds were closed, even though it was sunny outside. Just trying to survive after having a baby, knowing like, okay, we do need to switch from being nocturnal and have a good sleep schedule going. Eventually we got there, but it wasn't about rushing into that and just kind of taking your time. I think Phil took a week or 2 off, so we were both home, and it was great because I needed that for sure. And we did figure it out on our own, which was great. We did have a lot of people come over and give their opinions, which did stress me out a lot. It made me feel like I just didn't know how to do anything again, like the nurses. I really needed to find my voice after having Anthony, and I did. I learned how to put in some boundaries. Honestly, at that time, I didn't even know what a boundary was. I didn't even know what I was doing was enforcing a boundary. I thought I was being mean because I didn't have boundaries. I just let people run my life. And I just let people tell me what to do. They can tell me all their opinions and I'll just do them, right? I had no boundaries. I am sleep deprived. People are constantly wanting to come over, and me being a people pleaser and saying yes to everything and everyone, despite how it makes me feel, honestly, you get angry. Eventually, you're just going to have enough, right? I do remember one specific instant. My mom and my grandma had come over. They had asked to come over. I truly didn't feel like I wanted to have any company, but I pushed that aside and I said yes because I would make them happy. They came over, and all I can remember is the constant opinions of what my house looked like, that it was dirty, what I was eating. If I was eating, I was told that I had postpartum depression. I don't think that anyone outside of a doctor can tell you that, but I was told that by my mother. You have postpartum depression. Okay. Can't just be the baby blues. Are you pumping? How come your milk isn't being put in the fridge? I needed to find my voice at that moment, and I did. And I said, you know what? Enough's enough. I need to just have some peace. I need to just be alone. Can you please leave? I mean, I felt like I was being mean, But that's not being mean. That's enforcing a boundary. You've overstayed your welcome. I need you to leave right now. This is my house, right? They were quite appalled because I've never had a boundary. I've never enforced a boundary. I've never said anything like, you need to leave. To have enough confidence that this is my house. This is my life. I'm not in peace right now. I believe it's because you are here, so I need you to leave right now. To know that that's okay. I mean, I didn't think it was okay in the moment, and I felt like I was being mean. The reactions I got made me feel like I was being mean, but that's what I needed in that moment. Immediately, I just started feeling at peace, when I enforced that boundary. But that was the beginning of the end, I feel. It was Leah enforced a boundary and she's mean, and there was constant conflict after that. I needed to do that with my in-laws as well, because now that I was off on maternity leave, I was home all the time, which means my mother-in-law thought that it was okay to just drop by whenever without telling anybody. When I didn't sleep all night because we have a baby, maybe I wanted to sleep a little bit extra later in the morning, and I felt like I couldn't do that when my mother-in-law was already banging on my door, dropping off loads of stuff. And I think she thought that it was helping, as her way of helping out, but it was an over amount, like an extreme amount of stuff that she was bringing over. Like, for example, she was bringing over diapers, which is very nice. Anthony was a newborn and she was bringing, size 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is 6 boxes of diapers that he's not even wearing right now. Where are we going to store all this? It was an extreme amount of stuff. I feel that maybe if we communicated about that, it would have been different. Like, do you need diapers? Yes or no? Just kind of stuff like that. Or what do you need? Or can I cook you something? That would be helpful. Or do you need anything? Can I come over and maybe relieve you so you can take a shower? That would be helping. People, I guess, thinking that they're helping, they're just doing their own way of helping, which isn't actually helping. And now if you say something, you seem ungrateful. And that was the problem that we got into. So we were scared to even communicate that, because immediately we would be ungrateful. So that was all with Anthony. With Luke was a lot different because he was during COVID. I remember being off before having Luke because of COVID. I honestly thought COVID would last a week and that was it. I was off really pregnant with a 2-year-old and we couldn't go out. We couldn't see people. So I was really trying really hard to figure out what to do with him. Then the birth was extremely different because with Anthony, we were allowed to have everybody there, but with Luke, nobody was allowed at the hospital. It has its pros and its cons, but the cons were Phil wasn't even allowed to stay with me after Luke was born. He was only allowed to stay for like 3 hours and that was it. And then he had to leave. The nurses weren't even allowed to come into my room unless I called them for an emergency. Within hours after delivering Luke, I remember Phil leaving. I was solely alone with a newborn baby. The whole time I was nap trapped. Luke was on me. Luckily, he was able to breastfeed right away. I was like, thank God. Because I remember with Anthony, and he needed to be formula fed, and that whole transition, because I was pumping and then I lost my milk, was devastating for me. I felt like I was failing as a mother. I cried when Phil gave him formula for the first time, because it wasn't my milk and it wasn't from me. But eventually you get over that. You're doing what's best for your baby, which is feeding them. He was being fed and he was happy, and I would realize that, and it was great. But the very first time giving him formula, I cried. I was devastated. It wasn't from me, and I thought, I'm not a good mother. I can't even produce milk for him. With Luke, I felt so much better. Like I was able to provide for him and give him what he needed for as long as he needed it. But there's a difference with that. I had a lot more freedom with Anthony. Everyone else could just take a bottle and feed Anthony. So he was being passed around a lot, whereas Luke was just me. And so he needed me at all times of the day. He was really attached to me, obviously. He needed me to fall asleep. So I feel like I was breastfeeding 24 hours a day. He was always on me and he needed me to fall asleep. In the hospital, not having any help, I needed to go to the bathroom. It was devastating for Luke. He was put in the bassinet where I had to go to the bathroom. He was screaming and nobody came in to help me. So I felt horrible. And then immediately when I was done, boom, right back on me for him to feed. And that was my life. Until we got discharged and I could go home, which was a huge relief because then I could actually have help, you know. Phil could help with doing the diaper duty so he could bond with Luke. And then when I was breastfeeding, that was my time to bond with Luke. That's what was normal and our normal. Maybe not normal for what happened in our parents' generation, but this generation, that's what worked for us. Being home with a newborn and a 2-year-old was another ballgame. Like that was intense during COVID. Couldn't go anywhere, couldn't see anybody. And so the pros of that were we got a lot of just alone family time, which was great. I didn't have to put in boundaries and say, no, I don't want anyone to come over today. You know, I just feel like being at home without visiting. There was none of that because nobody was allowed to see anybody. So that was good. But Luke wasn't being socialized. So he was very playing strange with family members when we did get to go and see them. He was very much attached to me. There was a difference there between the two grandchildren. I remember Anthony learning his letters and his numbers so quickly because I had nothing else to do, right? So I remember making my own games, and when it was Anthony's nap time, I would write out the alphabet or like the numbers 1 to 10. I would put them around the house as like a treasure hunt. And then when he woke up from his nap, he would go in order from A all the way to Z and find them. It was such a good pastime. He learned his letters, he learned his numbers. I got creative. Anthony was just 2, and just everything I would make activity wise, like the treasure hunts, he just soaked it up like a little sponge. I had to get creative during COVID because there was absolutely nothing to do. So I remember making these little activities in these little bins, and I would color rice, or I would mix together egg whites and make this fluffy mixture. Just getting creative with different bins of things. I remember doing this one where I made Jell-O, and I would do all these things while he's napping. That by the time he'd get up, there would be a new exploratory bin for him to do. This one with Jell-O, I put little creatures or whatever, and then I poured the Jell-O on top, and he had to like dig for it. He was like eating the Jell-O. Everything was just like sensory for him and he loved it. I loved being creative too in that, because really you can't, if it's winter outside and COVID, you can't do anything. Like we could go outside and we tried to do that, but I mean, it was cold and he didn't want to be outside. You just get like cabin fever. A lot of the times in the winter, I would bundle them up and take them for just a drive around just to get out. And like we would blow bubbles outside in the backyard, or like just finding random stuff to do. We did a lot of baking, especially when Phil was doing his work downstairs. He would just smell all this baking. And once it was cooled off, I remember Anthony bringing him down like a tray or like a little tray of cookies or whatever he made with me. He was just so proud about it. But especially like during COVID, we would bake cookies, and then his way of visiting family members would be bringing a plate of cookies to each family's houses, knocking on the door and running back to our car and waiting for them to open the door. Basically, we would yell back and forth like, Anthony made you some cookies. It was just like our way of lighting up the situation of COVID, and he got to see his grandparents or his aunts and uncles, and they would do the same thing. I remember my brother's kids would bake Anthony some cookies and drop them off. And so it was like a back and forth thing. It was really sweet. I think he loved that part of it. Because going from seeing family members all the time and being passed around to all of a sudden COVID here and you can't see anybody unless it's on Zoom calls, that was really hard for him. I know his second birthday, nobody could come. We had to do a Zoom call birthday with everybody that like he normally would see at his birthday. He did look like he enjoyed it, but obviously you'd want family around in that, right? So that was a little hard. So when COVID kind of died down and Phil had to go back to work, that was a hard transition for us because for so many months, Phil was home and working from home and just we could go downstairs and visit him whenever we didn't really have much to do, or he would on our lunch like come join us. When he went back to work and he had to go out of town, that was really hard. Plus, I didn't get any breaks when he was out of town. So just figuring out life when Phil was out of town during COVID was really hard for me. I was a very sleep deprived because I for sure didn't get a break having Luke as a baby and Anthony as a 2-year-old. But also, like, the boys found it really hard not having their dad at home, and our form of communication was Zoom calls. You could tell that everyone was happy on the Zoom call, but afterwards, Phil would text me and be like, that was really hard. Like, I miss them so much. I just want to be around. Or like when I'm updating him during the day, I would send him little videos. I remember having Snapchat and just sending him Snapchats all the time of like, oh, Luke rolled over, or, and he was kind of missing those milestones being out of town a lot. I didn't want him to miss it completely. So I would send him these Snapchats like, oh, Luke said his first word and stuff like that. It was hard that way. Plus, I had to figure out how to fit in everything in little slots of time and really plan out our days so I could fit in some things for me, because I cannot just forget about me. That wouldn't be good for my kids, because I wouldn't be the best mom I could be if I didn't have a little me time, right? I would just be overworked and burnt out and not being my best self and moody if I didn't, get in a workout or do something for just me, because I'm a person too. And then I could be my best version that I can be for them. All of that was very hard on our marriage because we were away from each other a lot of the times. Like when he was away for work, it was a week at a time and he'd come home on the weekend. But that week just seemed such a long time. Anything can happen in that week with the boys, right? Like you miss a lot of things, but also we're not talking as much because he's not home. I would have to text him or send him a voice note or whatever, the Zoom calls. But then by the end of the day, when he wants to Zoom call me because he's finally off and he had supper and I've had put the boys to bed, I'm exhausted from my entire day. I don't really have the energy to talk to him. I did try, but then it was like, we're both exhausted and there was no communication. That Zoom call eventually just got to be like, how was your day? Good. How was your day? Good. It was just very surface level. And then, okay, well, I'm exhausted. I need to go to bed. And we would just end up going to bed. So that put a strain on our marriage for sure. When he would come home, like everyone would be happy. So we would feel a little bit more closer on the weekends. And then we'd have to do it all over again, right? That definitely does put a strain. Because then I don't feel like he's helping out as much, even though he can't, right? It's really hard. It's really, really hard. On like really hard days where I would have maybe like an off day with the boys, the nap times would be like my favorite, right? At this time, Anthony only was down to one nap. He'd go down just after lunch and then he'd wake up at like 3 on a good day. I would get like 3 hours of alone time because Luke would still be attached to me. They both napped at the same time, except for Luke's not in his crib or in his bassinet. He's on me. So the nap time would look like me on the couch with Luke on my chest, feeding the entire 3 hours and me watching my show, but just surviving. Like it was rest for me, but it also wasn't, because I was trying to be very quiet so that Luke wouldn't wake up early from a nap. He wouldn't get fussy and everyone would get that quiet time and not be so overstimulated. It was like a big exhale for me. I remember one time it was during nap time and I had no idea that Phil was planning on coming home early that week. And that day in particular was a very hard day. I don't know exactly like what happened, but I just remember it was rough. By Thursday, I think it was a Thursday, I barely slept at night, especially when your husband's not home. I was a light sleeper ever since I started becoming a mom. When another parent isn't home, I felt like I was always on guard and I had to be awake, or I would wake up at every little noise that I heard. So I was a very light sleeper, not getting any sleep. It was during the nap time. And I was just like almost in tears of like, I need a break. I need to even take a shower. Like, I don't think I even took a shower that entire week, just surviving, being there for the boys 100%, and having no help during COVID. I looked out the window and Phil was pulling in his truck, and I remember just bawling like, oh my God, I have someone home that can help me and I can finally take a shower. He walked in the door and I was like, here, take the baby. Like, it was just like, can I have a hug? And I need alone time and I need just time to myself. I remember that night he was like, you take a bath or a shower or take the longest shower of your life or whatever. I'll take the boys out for a walk. Luke was old enough to be in like that kangaroo pouch facing out. Anthony was in like a wagon or whatever. And Phil had to go to this length. He had a picture of me on his phone. And the entire 30-minute walk, he had to hold his phone out so Luke could see a picture of me on the phone so that he wouldn't cry for the entire walk, because he was that attached to me. Being away from me was like, he didn't like it and he would cry all the time, even though he was with Phil, right? So that was the length that Phil had to go to. It was like holding a picture of me for 30 minutes for him to be content enough so that I could have some alone time. Crazy times call for crazy measures, right? Like it was insane. Being that crazy attached to me, I barely remember Luke's first year. It just comes in like little snap pictures of just specific instances because I barely slept at all. I remember when he was 8 months, I was like, we got to do something. He's 8 months old. I remember when Anthony was 4 months old, he was sleeping through the night, 12 hours. That was insane. The first time Anthony did that, I was like, oh, I had the best sleep. And I rolled over and it was like, oh, Phil, like, did you get up with Anthony last night? Thank you so much. And he was like, no, I didn't. And we're like, what? What happened? And you automatically, is he still alive? Like, because you get up every like hour and a half, 2 hours. And the first time you don't, you're like, what's happening? What's wrong? But it was just that he slept through the night. But with Luke, he never slept through the night. And going 8 months of that is exhausting. So we had to find a sleep consultant and we had to find different techniques that would work for Luke so that he could stay asleep. If he woke up in the middle of the night, he could try and self-soothe and put himself back to sleep at that time. So with Anthony, he liked soothers. He would have like a bunch of soothers just like in his crib around him. And if he woke up during the night and his soother was out, he would just like search for it, another one, and stick it in his mouth. And that was him self-soothing. But with Luke, he didn't like soothers because he was breastfeeding. So it was really hard to find out what helped him self-soothe enough to put himself back to sleep. What we had to do was I had to wear a t-shirt all day and then at night safety pin it to his crib. He would roll over and my scent would be on the t-shirt and that would be enough for him to think that I'm there and he could put himself back to sleep and that he felt safe, that maybe I was there in that moment. So the sleep consultant and like that was such a relief, but it was also hard with having to put him in the crib awake and hearing him cry all the time and it just didn't feel right for me. That's why we had to figure out different ways and she worked with us and it was great. I got to finally get some sleep. And eventually he did learn to self-soothe and sleep on his own. So that was great. But I think that was like a full year until he was able to do that. When I had to go back to work, I felt like because I was off for so long during COVID, I was off for almost 2 years, I think. It was like a year and a half. I was pregnant and then COVID hit. Then I didn't go back until after my mat leave. So I'm pretty sure it was like a year and a half. Going back to my work and dropping off my kids at daycare, I just felt like I was missing out on their life. Like the majority of their day they're spent with somebody else. I was at work. I didn't necessarily enjoy that. So my mindset was go to work and I'm in work mode now. Nobody talk to me. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to clock in, do my job, clock out, and go see my kids. I didn't want to have fun at work or anything. When Phil was out of town, that was so hard because normally if he was in town, he would drop off the boys at daycare and pick them up because I had to be at work really early. I went to work before he went to work, and I would be off work after he was done work. So I worked longer hours than he did. When he went out of town, I had to rejig my entire day. I had to ask the daycare if they could take the kids earlier and if they could have them later, just so that I could go to work and do both, right? And figure out what's going to work for us. But the first couple of days were so hard because the boys are in a routine from when everyone's home. It just worked smoothly. But if one parent's not home and the other parent's doing it all, dinner's going to be later, right? I remember the first couple of days, the boys were just beside themselves crying because they're so hungry. I'm giving them snacks and everything while I'm cooking dinner. It was just crazy. And then by the time dinner would roll around, they wouldn't be hungry. It was just insane. I had to figure that out and pivot. The night before, I'd pick them up, we'd do dinner and all that, they'd go to bed, and then I would spend my evenings cooking dinner for the next night so that when we got home, I could just reheat it in the microwave and they could eat right away. That's what worked for me. Did I want to do that? No, I didn't want to spend my evenings making dinner for the next night, but that's what I needed to do in order to make our life run more smoothly. I basically didn't have a life. It was just wake up, go to work, come home, parent, cook dinner, go to bed. And that was basically on repeat. And then trying to figure out in there times for me. So I would wake up super early at 4 a.m. to work out with 2 baby monitors. Sometimes my workouts would be cut short because one of them would wake up or one of them would hear me. So I would either cut my workout short or work out with them downstairs. They would be playing and I'd be working out just to get in some me time. It's definitely needed. It was definitely needed for me anyway. So much of that chunk of life during COVID was built on surviving and doing what was best for us and our life, rejigging certain things or pivoting and just planning out what worked for us and sticking with it. I'm just absolutely shocked at how we could function and parent our children with such little sleep. We may not remember that year, but we did it. We survived it. We got through it really good to the best of our abilities with that little sleep. That's insane. I learned so much from just that year alone and who I want to be for me and who I want to be for my kids. Just that year alone taught me so much about myself, especially when you lean into it and you don't just stay in the, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? You lean into it and you survive it and you try and figure out what works. You learn a lot about yourself and who you want to be as a person and who you want to be for your kids. I'm glad that I went down this certain path of who I wanted to be for my kids, especially with our marriage too. We could have just not done anything, but we put in so much work in ourselves, in our kids, and in our marriage that everything just ended up working out for the best. Cherish that so much. Even though it was so hard, I will never forget it. Thank you for joining me on Navigating the Mess. Hopefully some of this resonated with you. If so, please hit the like and subscribe button or leave a comment. I would love to share the comments every episode. See you next week, same time, same place.